Okay. Now let's make sure we're actually live.
Well, yeah, we're gonna see. I'm pretty sure we're live now. Sorry, folks. I don't usually stream like this. We are
Okay.
live. Yes, we are
Okay.
live. So we just had a wonderful chat that you folks are just never gonna hear for like the last hour, and I am just so glad we did that. Um,
Yeah,
howdy,
so
howdy,
I
howdy.
was I was recording my audio, but apparently we weren't live, so I have to say this was probably my most brilliant
It
podcast.
was. It was. It was amazing. I mean, you can listen to his half. Um,
Right.
no, we did. We talked about desire, and I think we can sum it up a little bit. What we chatted about a whole bunch of different things. We talked about it within art. We talked about it as a general concept. We talked about it in both negative and positive aspects. We talked about it as of course inspiration. We talked about it as a mechanism of survival. We discussed what it means as like conceptually in terms of as an emotion um, and I don't know. We had a wonderful chat. Are there specific points you'd like to start off with, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, we've had a good discussion and
It's a great warm up.
I feel so silly.
I
Um
know. Well, that's my fault.
so essentially we had a really good conversation about desire. And one of the points that I one of the kind of thoughts that I came to was this about desire. Um Throughout this conversation, I feel like desire is an emotion in the sense that it is this force that comes from within that is really uncontrollable, and how we respond to it is within our control. Like, and I use the example of anger is an emotion. How we respond to it is within our control. Anger is the emotion. Yelling, perhaps, is the response. Desire is the emotion. Pursuing that desire in whatever form that desire uh, comes is the response to that. And we spoke a lot about the fact that, well, here's one point I'll get to that I felt was important. I was recently sick. I was down and out for about a week, and I was afforded something in that week that most people are not afforded these days, with the hustle of modern day life, and that was time to sit and think and just kind of analyze my feelings and my own thoughts. And while I was sick, I I didn't look at my phone hardly. I wasn't on Twitter, I wasn't on Facebook, I wasn't on eBay, I wasn't on anything really. I made a couple calls the whole time I was sick, or I was called. So I was cut off from the social media, and I was given the opportunity, and I had the time to think and feel about what I desire and what I truly deeply desire and what's truly deeply important to me. And I immediately thought of my girlfriend and my life with her, and what we want to do with our lives, and my friends, and how I want to be there for my friends and my family, and be a stand-up guy, to use, that phrase. And I wasn't being bombarded by these outside forces feeding me what I've been referring to as shallow desires. Um, the new cooler, six pack capability and Bluetooth attachment, these sorts of things. I wasn't being sold anything. I wasn't being told what to want. I had time to sit and think about what I actually desired, and that's something that's deep. And I think we all have desires within, but we need the time to think and sit and understand them and feel them.
So during our, I'm gonna call it our warm up discussion on desire, uh, we kind of defined what a shallow desire is, and would you let folks know what that is, and then I kind of want to go to the next step.
Yeah, I was just my examples of shallow desires, or what I said was healthy desires,
There you
and
go.
this is when you are, it's kind of like when you're well off financially, you can think about things that you don't need. That's what I would call shallow desires. Maybe things that you don't necessarily need, that aren't from a place of depth. They are
There you go.
maybe the maybe they are the impulse buy
And
desires,
so
you
what
know,
we
that
didn't
sort of thing.
do, what we didn't kind of define, we didn't come up with a term for it, but we did talk a lot about them. Whereas what I'll now call deep desires, right?
Yes.
These more powerful and rooted truths that are an emotional feeling of a lack or a need to attain, right? Um, and so some of those could be love, could be for family, could be that better person as you're talking about. It could be all these different things. We talked a little bit about the those kind of innate unconscious desires that are both that some are negative and some are positive. And I kind of spoke a bit about how little praise we give to the unconscious positive desires because they're almost, I don't know, accepted as just kind of fact or as part and parcel, compared to how concerned we are with correcting both negative conscious desires and negative unconscious desires. And I found that kind of fascinating. It's one of those kind of two-sided coins that we don't treat both sides equally.
Yeah.
uh, we talked a lot about desire as inspiration, and as one of the parts of our conversation I really liked was and we framed it around I believe, yeah, you framed it around Stephen King and how his art and how he kind of came from that art, or focused his
Ye-
art, his writing, to manifesting his fears to stop them from occurring.
Right. Well, what I was saying was that what I've heard often about desire is the importance of vocalizing a desire,
There we go. That was it.
bringing it into existence. And the way I phrased it was bringing it from this ethereal plane into the physical, making it real. And you were talking about comic book creator.
Yep, Grant Morrison, and
Yes.
he was my introduction to the concept of sigil magic. And then when I looked into it further and further, how deep and old those roots are, and what it really was, going back to the cavemen and trying to paint on those walls,
So
that next hunt.
give that example of him with the woman.
So Grant, one of his examples when he's given a concept on chaos magic, which I have different feelings on. But anyway, he's given his example of how he used his artwork to do that. He wanted to. There's another one I'll give too. That's a great example. But he wanted to meet a very specific shape and colored looking woman. He had his specifics, and so he drew his main character, which he had always felt was kind of a self insert, meeting this woman and dating her and all of that. And within a couple months, he alleges, and I have no reason not to believe him, but he's a showman, so who knows, that happened. There's another one that was kind of more basic. It's like, well, I wanted to go to Cancun or some island, take a bunch of dope and meet aliens. And he said that happened. That's his bit, right? Is he goes in with this intention to do this thing, and it was something out of the ordinary that he wouldn't usually do, that then he made happen, and then that took it further.
Yeah.
It's that exercise of ritual. Again, I brought up where we use that to again manifest, vocalize this greater, possibly unconscious, possibly conscious, usually a mix of both, set of desires of usually a group of people in ritual circumstances, but even personally, it can be that as well.
Yes, and that spoke to the idea of vocalizing or putting your desires into a reality, and helping them to manifest. And I brought up Stephen King because he said he writes his greatest fears because his mother told him when he was young, if you say something out loud, it'll never happen. So his inspiration for manifesting a reality is inverse. He writes
Yes.
the things he doesn't want to come true. So his writing is inspired uh, by fear and a desire to avoid fears, whereas Grant Morrison's writing was a desire for a fulfillment in life.
Yep, for
Uh,
experience and to have things
yeah,
occur to them. Um,
and it's interesting that the emotion that goes into it, the desire behind the work can often be what it evokes. This man writes out of fear, and his work evokes fear. And I was saying that an example of how this could be looked at another way is if Cody and I cooked the same dish, and if they preferred Cody's, and it was the same recipe. Well, what's the difference, Cody?
It was 10% more love.
He put more love into
I
it,
did.
and so people tasted the love.
It's the
So,
love.
but I thought that was a fascinating idea, this idea of what desire pushes you into the artwork and what desire it evokes in the audience. So, I cautioned people, and I said it, and I'll say it again. I'm not going to give away my gold too soon on this because I'm writing a song about it. But we have to be careful about whose desires we're consuming, because everything that's on a screen, or we read in a book or in a comic book or anything like that is someone else's desire that we're consuming. So, you know, a lot of us don't read the label before we eat something, and maybe we should. And the same goes for this. Robert Bly was an advocate of not separating the artist from the art, which we're often told to do these days. And I thought that was interesting. He's an advocate of understanding the artist and the art, and I think that's a wise idea considering what we've been discussing.
I think it's so as well. It's just it takes a deeper separation of the experience of artist and art to survive. Because I mean, you can love art and then you find out it comes from a crappy person and then you no longer love it. You could still love it. It's just you
Right.
have a greater and deeper understanding of it. But some folks can't make that extra leap of, well, this is just a. It's not like you're married to this person. It's not somebody you got to go see at a family gathering every year all the time, right? It's not that thing. It's another experience that you've come across, and some folks have a very difficult time integrating those things. I also would advocate for that. I've always found greater meaning and better experience with art when I understood the artist behind it. Um, Particularly
Yeah.
when their art demanded that, almost, where it's just like, why would they do this? And then you kind of feel and you see how they did it, how they went about presenting it, sometimes the amount of care they took in presenting something very, very specific, their desire again to place that. I find that all the time in some of the greatest comic book artists, and mangaka in particular, who spend hours and hours and hours a day every week throwing this desire to not only get paid and to take care of their studio and to feed their family and to maybe make it rich, whatever they're doing there, but also took the extra levels of, like, I want to show my readers this thing, and so I'm going to do that through line work and the choice of these lines and the choice of how I phrase this panel, the choice of how I wrote this dialogue, who this character is, why did I want to speak through this character this way. I find that just fascinating and so engaging, and you can find that in music as well. I have the hardest time with what you can soulless music. I'm just going to call it what it is. To me, it feels that way. You can tell somebody spent a lot of time. A lot of the time, the producer has spent a lot of time making that sound good. But what's behind it is just, I used a vaporous when
Shallow.
we're talking. It's shallow again, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have anything behind it, and a lot of those artists as well, I have a hard time gripping on, and I find so many others that I'm just like, okay, I know a bit more about them, and now I understand how and why their voice, and I use voice both as a voice, but also as the tone of their manifestations of art, so fascinating. And it's usually those desires and their experiences and all these different things.
Yeah, and I've had instances where I was here at the burger stand in Taos, and I was sitting down to eat, and a couple of people walked up to me, and they knew who I was. They'd seen me perform, and they were just kind of aware of me. And they're like, "Hey, can we sit with you and can we talk with you for a minute?" And I was like, "Yeah," but I had just gotten my food, so I was like, I was eating my burger, and I'm like, talking to these people, and they were very kind, and they were. I was very anxious talking to these people because I didn't really know them, and I can be sociable, but I was definitely like a little uncomfortable, not because of them, but just because of maybe a little anxiety. But they were just talking to me. They were very kind. They're very casual. And before he got up to leave, the guy I was talking to, he said, "Well, I just wanted to, I'd heard your music and I'd seen you around town, but I just wanted to sit and I wanted to talk to you and I wanted to get an idea of who you were and your wit and your personality. And I just wanted to to have that moment. And that just speaks
Mm.
to what we're talking about. Apparently, he wanted to connect the art with the artist. He wanted to know who I was and get a little bit more insight into maybe what makes me tick and just sharing the space with me, feel my presence, I guess, and kind of maybe get an understanding of who I was on some level.
And that was, a desire because your art had sparked some kind of intrigue in it, right? He wanted to understand why you're
Evidently,
doing that. And I can speak from watching your shows and working alongside you and all these different things that it takes a lot to do what you've done over these decades, particularly standing in front of a crowd very directly. I can do it all the time via mic over the web. That's no problem. I'm not looking at people, and I do it very selfishly as well. I do it for myself, so it's like whatever comes out of it comes out of it. But to do that, to bring joy, to bring music, to bring vibrations and all of these different things to a crowd very directly, it's not something many people can do. And with the voice that you choose to manifest, I could see that being very intriguing to people.
yeah, and let's I am not unselfish. I enjoy being seen.
Mhm.
I enjoy entertaining. I have a desire to entertain people. You know me, Cody. I'm always cracking jokes,
This is very true.
saying maybe the wrong thing at the right time, uh, just for the sake of comedy, just for the sake of entertainment, because I like to entertain people, and being seen is a nice part of that. It's good to know you're having an effect on the world. I think that's what it is. I think that's what it comes down to. It's some kind of power. It's some kind of influence. It's knowing, hey, look, I'm here. I did this on the guitar. People reacted. I am present in this reality. I am making a difference. I am influencing this reality. I am exerting some kind of influence on this reality. I told a joke. People laughed. This is real. I think that could be part of it. Is a desire to just maybe that's part of growing down, which James Hillman talks about in his book The Soul's Code, is that we have to grow down into reality. That's part of becoming. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's me. My desire to grow down into this reality is to pull a string here and see something over there move and know that I'm here.
So now that we've talked about some of the positive manifestations of actually acting on your desires and finding a great path towards that, we also, and we haven't talked about it here, but when we talked about it in the pre-show, uh, we talked about the what happens when you don't do that, when you don't
Yeah, and
choose to find that path.
I could read the William Blake quotes if you'd like to hear
Go for it.
those.
Go for it.
William Blake wrote these. These are his quotes. He says, "He who desires and acts not breeds pestilence." Another quote: "Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desire." And that's the one that particularly resonates with me. And as I've said before, I've seen this happen. And I'll give a brief explanation about this. So in James Hillman's book, The Soul's Code, he talks about some of Plato's philosophy and this idea of the daemon or the guardian angel. When you're born, you're in the other world, and your fate and your destiny, they're all weaved, and it's laid out in front of you. You see it, and you know that this is your path in life. This is your fate. This is your destiny. The daemon knows this as well. When you're born into this reality, you forget about it. But your daemon remembers, your guardian angel remembers. It knows what you're supposed to do. And this is one explanation for these moments of inspiration or that urge to act. It's your daemon nudging you or giving you an opportunity, it kind of tickling your side to be like, hey, look at that. This is where you need to be, or this is where you don't need to be. You have to learn how to interpret these messages. But the idea is that this guardian angel, this daemon, is trying to push you along this path, help guide you to the destiny that you're meant for. And if you don't listen to the daemon, if you don't follow this path, it'll start to punish you. And these are the people you see who are angry, they're bitter, there's something chewing them up inside. And it's this punishing force of unacted desire.
Yeah, and I think I mean we talked about some of the worst, and even we even talked about some manifestations of that desire where it's a very negative desire that was manifested, some dark
Yes.
stuff, and you know I too believe we many, and I mean this has been throughout history. We seek to be the best of ourselves, and that perspective varies very much from person to person, and it can get really nasty, or it can be overly good to the point that like it's never gonna happen and it's unhealthy. It can
Yeah.
be really good where it's just like, well, that's a goalpost, but let's see how far I can get. You know, um, and those are that's you mentioned many times is desire as a tool needs to be thought of metaphorically. It needs to be a much larger target that you have to be happy basically wherever you're hitting on it at the time. um,
Yeah.
and look more and more for a more accurate shot, but
And
be okay with it.
and I can say that honestly, this is something that had just occurred to me. Throughout my musical path, my expectations and my desires have broadened. They've consistently broadened. I think when we're 15, it's always going to be we got to be the next big thing. We got to be huge. We got to be the biggest band in the world. We got to break all the records. We got to be number one. That's when you're 15, that's the fire in your belly. That's the desire. For it certainly was for me. I wanted to be just massive, and I thought of myself as massive, and I think that helped.
Oh, it definitely
Uh
helped. Definitely thinking
helped with
back to that time, man. It really makes a big difference when you're thinking like that. And I can,
Yeah,
you can
you
see,
project that.
yes, yeah, and you end up being better than you have any right to be. That was the other bit too.
Right, yeah,
It's
you
just
can
because of that.
the sum is greater than the whole of its parts.
Yep.
But, as I've grown older and maybe wiser, hopefully, it's changed. It's like, well, if I can play music and it can be like, obviously, I'm gonna keep writing music and playing music because I have a passion for it. I have a desire for it. But if I can make a little money here and there and go play a show out of town for the weekend and get to go on a trip with my girlfriend for the weekend and play some music, that's great. That's awesome. And that's a big difference between being the number one band in the world to just, well, it'd be nice to just get out of town every once in a while and make a little bit of money. So uh that desire of mine, it's way more of an achievable goal. I can fulfill that desire, and I am very fulfilled when that happens. I don't lament not being the biggest band in the world. I
That's
really
the
don't.
big thing that I
It would be
think.
nice, but I'm not crushed by that not happening.
I think what I'd like our next topic, because this kind of brought that up, is I think as you get older, you realize how much compromise isn't such a terrible thing. There are times when it is absolutely awful, but at the end of the day, you are faced with reality, and you're faced with capability. You're faced with location, time. All you faced with reality in its entirety, and so you have to find a way, and that way is quote
Yeah,
unquote, you can phrase it as compromise, and that has really positive connotations in some ways and some kind of negative ones, but
yeah,
at the end of the day I think it is when you're faced with these desires and as they grow and change, I think the mechanism of that growth and that change is compromise. um,
yeah. Like I think just a good visualization of this. Let's say your desire is just you're gunning it down the road 80 miles an hour, and there is a brick wall in front of you. And the compromise you have to make is, well, you got to go around the brick wall. It might take you 50 miles away from your destination down some back road that maybe you won't find your way back out of ever again. Uh, but it's either that
or
or barrel
smashing.
straight into the wall and then try to pick up the pieces, and then you don't have a car anymore, so you have to walk the rest of the road. You slow yourself down, you're angry, you're beat up because you couldn't make that simple detour.
Absolutely. And so
So I think it's about making those little detours.
absolutely, and I think that's a big part of it. Um, I I I I think there are always going to be those they're not so much those deep unrealistic quote unquote desires, right? Those ones that are at the core that just cannot happen when faced with reality.
Yeah.
And I don't think those are bad things. I think, in fact, the growth to grow alongside them as you get older and as you experience life and you're presented with a wider perspective of what it is to be you, uh, as that occurs, the how do I phrase this? Um, mm, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get to where I wanted to
The
go.
potentials for manifestation broaden.
There you go. Thank you. Yes, yes, that's what I was thinking. Is as a tool instead of decaying and rusting and becoming this bitter thing that's hard to hold and rough, it can actually refine and more sharply. It can be a more specific tool from this
It's
broad great
it's
desire.
a hammer turns into a scalpel.
Yes, there you go. There you go. And
Yeah,
I think
because
that's a very cool thing.
yeah, because when you're young, you don't have the skill set to use a scalpel anyway. You're a
Yep.
hammer wielding maniac,
Yep.
you know? And
Exactly.
hopefully as you grow, you can move more delicately and you can have more meticulous precision and flow. And so you need a tool that can meet that. And if you're at a point where you're ready for that tool, well, it's going to be accessible to you because the tool's within. And so the whole time you were becoming ready to use that tool, the tool's been being forged.
Exactly. And I think Desire Kid, if it's under the proper tempering, if you've been doing the necessary, we did speak about this as well, when you ignore this tempering, when you forsake it, it does rust. It does it that maintenance becomes an issue. Um, you aren't
Yeah, I
prepared to, not only aren't you prepared to use it, but that tool becomes something very dangerous to carry.
yeah, and I didn't say this in the precast, we'll call it.
Yeah.
But a thought that occurred to me, and I had written it out in a poem, but I'll just paraphrase some of the ideas because I have desires. I'm a human being. Guess what? I have desires, and I had desires that I wasn't acting on, or they weren't being fulfilled, right? And so I just kept having dreams, and again, and again, and again, and it was just haunting me. And so I realized that this desire had become a malignant force, and it had gained power. And this is my visual. This is my. This is how I'm gonna try to explain that. I see it as the pool, the soul's pool, waters of the soul, right? And these desires that in this case I was conscious of, I pushed down into the soul's pool. And this desire became a force that fed on darkness and it gained strength in the bottom of this pool where the light couldn't reach it. And eventually it resurfaced and it started flailing and throwing itself around and screaming and throwing water and just ripping its way through this pool and demanding attention, demanding to be looked at. And that's all it needed. It just needs some attention. You just need to look at it. It's like a bad child. They throw a fit because they want you to look at them. They're bad because they want attention. It's the same thing. It's a desire is an unruly child. Desire can be an unruly child. Unnurtured desire can be an unruly child. That's a good way to think about it. So all I had to do
Yeah.
was look at it and oh, that's a desire. That's a very specific desire. Maybe that's not achievable. I need to look at it more metaphorically. That was advice given to me by my friend. And so now I can look at this desire more metaphorically, and I can see it in a bigger way, and I can fulfill it because it's broad now, like we were talking about. It's not so pinpoint laser focused. It's metaphorical, and metaphors are way easier to understand, and the way easier to fulfill a metaphorical concept than uh, a deadly specific one.
Yeah, again, it's a larger dartboard where there's a whole bunch of places you could be scoring and winning instead of only hitting that bullseye. Um,
Yeah,
and as using the child again as well, I mean, how often can you use logic, reason, and specifics with a child?
I've
No, you
tried.
need to play the game. You need to engage with it on its terms up to a point,
Yeah,
right? You can't do it too far.
can't let the desire run you.
Exactly, but it needs respect to be heard and to be cared for. Again,
Yeah,
it becomes it becomes a problem otherwise. And so I think overall it's another term like hope that we did before that it don't want us to talk too much in circles, but it's a tool. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be respected and utilized correctly. Otherwise, it is becomes a force instead, and one that very well could be very difficult to carry.
this is another way of looking at it. Let's say there's a tornado outside. Whether you're aware of it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, there's a tornado outside, and it's coming towards you. So, without knowledge, without looking at it and trying to understand it and realize what's happening, you can't do anything about it. You have to look at it and you have to try to understand it. Then something can be done about it. You have to see the tornado to know to run from it. You have to see the uh, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to know to run towards it. So, looking deeply at ourselves, paying attention to our dreams, and I'm not talking about our goals. I'm talking about when we're sleeping. Deciphering those metaphorically. Oh, I had a dream that there was a black widow in my room. I looked and there was no black widow. Uh, think about it metaphorically. It probably means something else. That sort of thing. And I think this is the key to making our desires conscious. And then when they're conscious, we can acknowledge them and we can actually work towards appeasing them. Perhaps, maybe not fulfilling them. Maybe that's the next step. We start with appeasement. Start with understanding, work your way up to appeasement, and then perhaps fulfillment. But it's steps. But something has to be done. Become aware of your desires.
Absolutely,
That's what I'm trying to do.
I think that's the big one. That uh, honestly, if there's nothing else to come out of here, basically anything that we talk about on here because they tend to be the whole point. These giants that we're speaking of, they're large concepts that people wrestle with just being a person. And desire in particular, I mean, there's entire didn't talk about it much on this. Talked about it quite a bit in the precast. Was uh, whole spirituality is based on removing desire
Yeah.
as a concept, and that's not innately a bad thing, but that too, when it is itself a desire and when it is not thought of metaphorically is a corrupter. It is another one of those very negative kind of things. It's I don't know if we mentioned it much here, but it's a bottomless pit. It's something that it's endless and you can't do it. Um,
Once a desire is fulfilled, another comes to the forefront.
and it just feeds again and again and again. You can see that happens in this society, in the wealthy. It just continues. How often do they just kind of sit fat and happy? Sometimes, but it takes a better person than most in those circumstances to do so. Um,
And
Go for it.
another thing we talked about that I just want to touch on as well. Cody mentioned is the how finite our time is
Yeah.
on this planet, and I, in reference to Cody saying that, I said, well, that really speaks to the power of desire because we can let that desire consume our entire life, knowing that our life is very limited. And so that speaks to the power of desire, both in a positive and a negative way, because we only have so much time on this earth. So we have to be careful which desires we indulge.
And it's true. Some you do have to. Well, see, I think those are those shallow and perhaps sometimes even illusory ones. We talked about marketing, for instance, for a little bit, and that's when they're trying to use a reflection of something that you may have, what we use as term, a deeper desire that you may have, and they're casting that light upon something that they're trying to sell you onto it.
Right.
And
The
yeah,
the example I used was it's if desire is an iceberg, and the tip of it, is what we can see and what we can understand, and we see something that reflects the tip of the iceberg of that desire. Like I said, we saw a commercial for a new car. So we think we want that new car, but maybe what we actually want is to roam the country free, or maybe we want that family of four that's riding around in the car in the commercial. So we buy the car and we're not fulfilled. So I think there are times when those shallow desires can be a reflection of a deeper desire that we don't understand fully. And again, maybe we're taking that desire too literally. It's the car we saw in the commercial. It's the vacuum cleaner, it's the vacation to Maui. Uh, Perhaps it's reflecting and hitting on something that's peeking out, but it's actually something else deeper, but it's resonating with us. So we jump on it thinking that that's going to, fulfill us. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't.
and so again, it's just one of those things that when you're faced with a larger concept, which of course in this case we're focusing on desire, you take your time to understand that. I think that's what we're doing here. That's kind of what To Walk with Giants. That's its point, and I think it's a very worthy goal. Um, and so I'm so glad you folks have joined us on this. I am very sorry for a couple of these technical difficulties. It's just it happens sometimes. Hopefully, one of these times I'll have it down. But we're here, and I'm so grateful for my co-host being patient with me. I am totally consumed by brain fog. I have started not a new gig, but I'm back to work, and it's longer hours than I'm used to, and I am just losing my head. But I think I
I
had
have
a
a
wonderful
deep
time.
desire to be a man of understanding.
That's good. I'm very glad. I desire to be understood
There
so
you
very
go.
much. But I thank you folks so very much for joining us. I really do. Thank you for your patience. I hope you catch the replay. I know some of you were probably waiting. The advertising was for an hour ago. I don't usually. Well, now
Hey,
as I get
technical
practice,
glitches, they
it
happen.
we can call that. It's also I went and we did talk about it much on this one, but we did talk about before the relationship between desire and instinct. My instinct when podcasting thought everything was one way, and I forgot that we do it differently here. And so I've written down the steps, and we shouldn't have any problems next go, except for the wonderful green screen you're seeing. I don't know what's going on with that, so I got to figure out why that's not disappearing. But I will get you guys next go.
Yes, and also, if we feel so inclined, perhaps we'll upload. I did record my audio. I did
Yes.
hit some points in that
Yes.
that we didn't get to in this cast. So maybe I'll cut that together and upload that as a supplementary piece. If you guys want to hear a little bit more of my thoughts on desire.
I think that'd be very worthwhile, and I actually have some steps to stop this from occurring next time as well. I will also be hitting the record button on OBS, so I'll have a hard code just in case something like this happens again. But
Folks, we had to
we
compromise
had to
this time.
compromise. I had one desire, and it
And I
was
think
yeah.
that's going to be our next topic is compromise.
Yep, exactly. I'm looking forward to that one. I've got a lot to say about that. I think we all do, both good ones and bad ones. I think it'll be a fun
Yes.
topic. And if you have any thoughts, comments, experiences, anything you want to share with us down below, we would absolutely love hearing it. Share it if you think the wisdom is worth listening to, or if you just think, hey, look at these putzes. I don't care. We would love to get around. We love having these conversations with you, and I thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you all. Manage your desires, find out what they are, and don't let them control you. And thanks for joining us.
Yeah, listen to the man. All right, adios, amigos. Thank you.